everyone. Welcome to the program. This is Sunday Politics live on Channels Television. I'm Sean Kimaloye in Abuja. Tonight is a special edition owing to the series of events in our country. And today we woke up to President Bola Tinubu addressing the nation. We shall be spending the next 2 hours to dissect all of these issues and give you also citizens' perspectives, well-meaning Nigerians, and of course statesmen who are already speaking up about it. Government is also going to be telling us how to arrest the food inflation and the shortage that is being perceived to be happening, and of course some of the issues relating to food inflation. So sit tight, everyone. It's going to be a bumper package. Well, good evening. Over the past 4 days, Nigeria has witnessed intense street protests and agitation under the banner of End Bad Governance. These demonstrations have in many ways drawn the attention of the government and the world to the yearnings of the average Nigerians and the plight of the poor and the vulnerable in our society. The protests in some ways have crippled the economy, bringing a majority of economic activities to a standstill. Nigerians woke up this morning to an early day address by President Bola Tinubu, which has sparked a wave of reactions. While some are calling for an end to the protest, arguing that dialogue is the way forward, the organizers insist the protest will continue and the demands of the protesters have not been met. Many protesters remain steadfast, vowing to continue until their grievances are fully addressed. Let me quickly give you a roundup of what has happened today in selected parts of the country. In Lagos, for example, Nigeria's Commercial Nerve Center, a small group of the End Bad Governance protesters gathered around the Ganefawemi Park, chanting solidarity songs. Shortly after President Bola Tinubu's address to the nation, the protesters said that the president has not addressed the core issues raised by them, despite touching on effort by his administration. Policemen and other security agencies were still on the ground at the park, but the police barred the protesters from holding a procession beyond the designated ground at the Ganefawemi Park, Ojota. The protesters complied without argument and returned to the designation point. But at some point earlier in the day, some hoodlums chased the protesters who gathered around the Ganefawemi Park in the Ojota area of Lagos out of the arena. And early in the morning, a major disagreement played out amongst the organizers of the protest in the Ojota area of Lagos, where a lawyer who simply identified himself as JP came to address the protesters to leave the protest grounds, on the basis that President Bola Tinubu has addressed the nation. But another group led by a 70-year-old Adegboyega Adeniji of the Peace Action Transformation insisted on remaining on the protest ground until further notice. And in Abuja, the nation's capital, the popular MKO Abiola Stadium was deserted as streets deserted with scanty vehicular movement, but the stadium environment was heavily guarded by security operatives. Let me now take you to Jos in Plateau State, where Prophet Issa El Buba led the protesters in a peaceful march on the 4th day of the protest, where after they held a service on the protest grounds. Well, from the streets, let's take you to what happened very early this morning. President Bola Tinubu at about 7 a.m. addressed the nation in over 20-minute long broadcast. The president asked the protesters to return home. He equally condemned the activities of those who destroyed private properties and public infrastructure. However, President Tinubu ruled out the return of subsidy on PMS film, popularly known as petrol. Let me remind you of some of the key things the president said in that address. First, he condemned the destruction of property. Take a listen.
I am especially pained by the loss of lives in Borno, Jigawa, Kano, Kaduna, and other states the destruction of facilities in some states, and the wanton looting of supermarkets and shops, contrary to the promise of protest organizers that the protest will be peaceful across the country. The destruction of properties set us back as a nation, as scarce resources will be again used to restore them. I commiserate with the families and relations of those who have died and the protests.
All right. The president also said that dialogue should be the way forward in resolving some of these issues.
I enjoin protesters and the organizers to suspend any further protest and create room for dialogue, which I have always acceded to at the slightest opportunity. Nigeria requires all hands on deck and need us all, regardless of age, party, tribe, religion, or other divides, to threaten any section of this country. Be warned, the law will catch up with you. There is no place for ethnic bigotry or such threats in the Nigeria we seek to build.
Perhaps a major aspect of the president's address that a lot of the agitators, protesters, and a lot of Nigerians wanted to hear is about the fuel subsidy. They're asking that the president should revert or reverse the policy on the removal of fuel subsidy. Let me remind you of what the president said in that respect.
Just over a year ago, our dear country, Nigeria, reached a point where we couldn't afford to continue the use of temporary solutions to solve long-term problems for the sake of now and our unborn generations. I therefore took the painful yet necessary decision to remove fuel subsidy and abolish multiple foreign exchange systems, which had constituted a noose around the economic jugular of our nation. These decisions are made were necessary if we must reverse the decades of economic mismanagement that didn't serve us well.
There was a promise by the president in that address that infrastructure, they are quickly working on infrastructure to get the economy working. But let me take you straight to the point where the president said he has heard the protesters, and the manner in which he has heard them, is it low or unclear? Take a listen to him.
My dear Nigerians, especially our youths, I have heard you loud and clear. I understand the pain and the frustration that drive these protests, and I want to assure you that our government is committed to listening and addressing the concerns of our citizens. The economy is recovering. Please, don't shut out this oxygen.
Right. You heard the president. I told you it's an almost 20-minute long address. You can still watch it on our YouTube page and go on China Television's website for you to get a breakdown of what the president said. But there have been a series of reactions to the president's Sunday morning broadcast. Let me allow you to look at what a human rights activist and lawyer, Mr. Femi Falana, said. He has called on President Bola Tinubu to address the demands of the peaceful protesters. In a statement, Mr. Falana says a presidential speech delivered this morning falls short of addressing the key demand of the protesters. Reversal of the policy of withdrawal of fuel subsidy. He went further to say, quote, if the government takes the fight against corruption to oil dealers and crude oil is processed in government-owned refineries, there will be no basis for fuel subsidy, which is induced by the importation of petroleum products, a positive response to the key demands of the youth to review the protesters could make them review their actions. Insensitivity to their demands can only provoke continued action. End of quote. Now, from Falana to the presidential candidate of the PDP in the 2023 election, and the former Vice President Atiku Abubakar is equally reacted. His media aide released a statement earlier today. That's Paul Ibe. In that statement, he says, "It's called the president low." He described the speech of the president as hollow and fails to address the hardship of Nigerians. Atiku says, quote, "This address lacks credibility and fails to offer any immediate, tangible solutions to the Nigerian people, given the extensive publicity surrounding the protests and the threats issued by government officials against demonstrators. One would have expected President Tinubu to present groundbreaking reforms, particularly those aimed at reducing the exorbitant cost of governance. But alas, no such announcements were made. The president ignored the protesters' demands, such as suspending the purchase of aircraft for the president, downsizing his bloated cabinet, or even eliminating the costly and burdensome office of the First Lady, who has been indulging in extravagant trips at the nation's expense." End of quote. Now, Nobel laureate Wole Soyinka is particularly worried about the civil engagement of the protesters and the security agencies. He has condemned the manner in which the security agencies handled the protesters. Mr. Professor Soyinka, in a piece he titled "The Hunger March as Universal Mandate," says, quote, "The nation's security agencies cannot pretend unawareness of alternative models for emulation, civilized advances in security intervention. The time is long overdue, surely, to abandon permanently the anachronistic resort to lethal means by the security agencies of governance. No nation is so underdeveloped, materially impoverished, or simply internally insecure as to lack the will to set an example. All it takes is to recall its own history, then exercise the will to commence a lasting transformation, inserting a break in the chain of lethal responses against civic society. One way or the other, this vicious cycle must be broken." End of quote. In part, what Professor Wole Soyinka said in his piece. Let's make sense of all of this, shall we? Let's get some insight into what the president said in that address and get some perspective on the messaging and what this exactly means for Nigeria. I'm being joined by the presidential candidate of the ADC in the 2023 election, Mr. Kachikwu, who joins us live here in our Abuja studio. Thank you so much indeed for joining us tonight.
Thanks for having me, Sean.
You were expecting that speech. A lot of Nigerians were expecting. Some set their alarm clock. Some moved their service, first service to second service. Christians who go to early service just to watch the president. Were you disappointed in that speech?
I didn't expect better. I've watched the president make a series of speeches in the last 14 months, and it's obvious that his speech writers write a speech that they believe will evoke emotions, but don't particularly speak to the realities of our situation as Nigerians. And the president goes out and makes this speech. There's a difference between the speech that has been written and the speech that has been delivered. Sometimes the delivery says a lot, you know. I didn't see in the body language of the president today a man who was agitated about what's happened in the last 1 week. The president of a country has lost 19 of his citizenry to bloody protest, where businesses have been shuttered and what have you. I didn't see in that body language. I just saw a man reading a prepared speech. And this is what I noticed from his speech today. And if you look at again at a lot of things he mentioned in that speech, you will see he talked about the vexatious issue of fuel subsidy. Now, when you look at fuel subsidy and remember of fuel subsidy, I've heard in the last week or two, a lot of people have said that all candidates in the last election said they removed subsidy. I disagree. I never said that. What we said was that fuel subsidy could be suspended for a minimum period of 3 months whilst we put in place a fraud-proof subsidy scheme. You cannot take away subsidy from a nation that God has endowed with precious natural resources such as oil and gas. It makes no sense. So you take away subsidy from petroleum products, you take away subsidy on power, and you ask the people to then do what? So Nigerians are suffering at an all-time high, even though we concede that the former president sets the stage for what we are experiencing now. But this president could have taken a different approach. I think subsidy removal, which was not done by him, was an own goal. In his first speech as president of Nigeria, in his maiden address when he was being sworn in, the president said, I will remove subsidy. But that was not true. You are aware that President Buhari didn't put any budget for subsidy in the last year's budget. So the president ought to have said, I've come to meet a situation where there's no subsidy, there's no budget for subsidy. I might provide for this in the supplementary budget, or we'll look at how to make this scheme better. But like a cowboy, he took on that burden, that difficult job to say, I remove subsidy, whereas he didn't remove subsidy.
So you think it was a wrong decision?
It's absolutely
what
a wrong decision.
What about almost a decade or more agitation and those experts, well meaning Nigerians, who have said the subsidy is a scam and it's a way, unlike the president has said, is one of the nooses around our economy, strangling the economy and allowing the few to benefit while the large majority of our nation, of our people in our nation, suffer. They cannot get the benefit of it.
So is Nigeria a banana republic? What do you mean that you have a few people abuse a system and they cannot be arrested or prosecuted? What are we talking about here? These people are less than 1,000 people, steal trillions of naira, and nobody has been arrested or prosecuted. And then you make 200 million Nigerians suffer for what God has given to them. How does that begin to make sense?
So you do not agree with the president?
I absolutely disagree with the subsidy removal. He shouldn't have done that. They remove subsidy on power.
So how do you then align the fact that there is no budget for it? And how do you cope as a president, as a government, when there are no provisions for the payment of subsidy?
That's why you have supplementary budget. Then you budget for it. That was last year's budget, right? You budget for it. Does this make sense? Look, he removed subsidy, or he announced that subsidy has been removed. He had a supplementary budget. He didn't cater for subsidy. Then you then come and say to Nigerians, guess what, guys? I'm going to give you student loans. You take my money from me and you loan it back to me. I will give you credit schemes where you get money to buy electronics, whatever you want to buy. My money and you loan it back to me. How does that begin to make sense? Then you see how subsidy has affected every single thing. Inflation at an all-time high, double digits, going to 30%, 40% in Nigeria. What they're telling us is in the low 20s, but trust me, it's over 30s. How does a nation grapple with this? Tell you what, Shane, we are an import-dependent nation. When the president came in, was sworn as president, the cost of clearing one container of a 40-foot container was about 5 or 6 million naira. You know what the cost is today? Around 20 million naira in an import-dependent nation. So you will say you want to tackle inflation, and you have such a situation where everything we use in Nigeria is being imported, and you're paying that much. How won't you have inflation in Nigeria? So this president keeps on scoring own goals. But she will tell you what. Do I really blame this president? Absolutely not. I blame his handlers. I will tell you, listening to the president during the debates or the so-called debates that we had, you get the sense that President Tinubu is one of the smartest presidents we've had. He knows what needs to be done. He understands what the issues are. But being governor of Lagos State, being a leader of APC is totally different from being president of Nigeria. The myriad issues we have facing us as a nation is not something you come and tackle as like a leader of APC.
So you imagine that there is a Bola Tinubu that has the personality, the heart, and the skill set to be able to fix Nigeria's problem?
Absolutely. Trust me. He's a progressive at heart. So you see in some of the policies he's trying to bring on board and all those things, he's a progressive at heart.
So that's a good element of
absolutely.
But unfortunately for you, what you're trying to drive at is that the policies are not in tandem with what is supposed to be the possible solution for our problems.
Correct. So you have the progressive president on one hand, and you have the Emilocon president on the other hand. So these two personalities are in conflict with each other. The Emilocon president is the one who came and assumed the toga of removing subsidy, whereas he didn't remove subsidy. The The local president is the one who came and allowed a situation after removing subsidy to then remove the subsidy on power. That does not make any sense. We've heard Nigerians complain about the appointments that were made, and 70-80% of those appointments went to his kit and cane. How do you, after an election like the one we had last year, there's no election that divided Nigerians like that ever. And what you should do as a president when you come on board is to seek to bring Nigerians together. Tell you what, after the Supreme Court judgment, if I were the president, to assuage the feelings of Nigerians, the first thing I would have done would have been to have removed the INEC chairman. Do you know what that would have done to the people who felt that the elections did not meet little test of credibility? The president did not do that. Listen to his speech again today, where people are protesting. If you see the protests in the UK, you see people are looting. So in America, when you see protests, you see people loot. So you always have these people looting
in France, the same,
and in France the same thing, and all those things. So those are not the real issues. We understand that we worry about protests in Nigeria because you are likely to have, because of the religious ethnic sentiments about Nigeria, it could lead to anarchy or full-blown civil war. We worry about that, yes. But what is the real issue? The issue is the removal of subsidy and the fact that Nigerians are suffering. Shehu, if you're not suffering, I am suffering. A lot of people are suffering, right? But the issue is it came from removal of subsidy. What does it take for this president to say, guess what, guys? I will suspend this subsidy removal for the next 3 months. And let's review that whole scheme. And I'll bring the best brains from across party lines and let's come up with a foolproof scheme, a fraud-proof scheme that serves or caters to all Nigerians.
So are you saying that, that established notion that subsidy has to go pre the election was a scam also, because the articles of this world, the Peter Obis of this world, and several other candidates, including the president as the APC candidate, all believe that subsidy, when they get into office, they will remove it. So you are saying that that notion is incorrect.
I'm happy you mentioned Atiku, Peter Obi, and President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. You are talking about an old generation who see things differently. The reality is that if you understand what the people of this generation understand, you know it's the easiest thing to ensure that that subsidy scheme is fraud-proof. It's very easy. With technology, with the right policy, you can make it fraud-proof and ensure that Nigerians don't suffer.
So you are saying that subsidy should remain?
Absolutely.
What about
yes.
the scam around it?
The scam, tell you what, Shemu, do you know if this president came and said, you know what, in the first 3 months, I'm going to go after everyone who's been involved in subsidy scam?
But you operate in that sector. You know the kind of difficulties over the years that we have experienced. I remember Senator Bukola Saraki raising this, which was one of the agitations which started on the floor of the Senate that led to that uprising in the country at that time, where the Occupy protest, was majorly in Lagos and in several parts of the country. And all of these years of argument about subsidy not saying, you are now clamoring that subsidy is the way to go.
Sheon, imagine this situation. You have a few people who make away with trillions of naira. They have enough money to form any government, to put any governor in power. And that's what these guys are doing. And that's why people are scared of them. But I imagine...
So they're a cabal.
They're a cabal.
The money is enormous.
A very rich cabal. But I imagine that a big boy President Bola Ahmed Tinubu will not be influenced by this cabal. He will go after these people. He will write his name in the annals of our history as a progressive president who did what nobody else could do.
If you say that these people are cabal, they have deep pocket, they have a lot of money, they could do anything they want to do because they have the money. And the president said, I will stifle their further plundering of our economy. Isn't that one way of doing it? Could it also be that these are the people that are making sure that things does not work because their source of livelihood has been taken away from them?
So what you are saying to them is this. For the last 15 years, you guys have made 15, 20 trillion, 30 trillion naira, right? Go with your stolen loot. I will now impoverish Nigerians. I will make Nigerians suffer for what you've stolen. That's what the president seems to be saying.
So you're saying that the president should go after the subsidy cabals?
That's what.
Who are these people? Is it possible that the nation unveils their identity?
Trust me on this. They know who these people are. These people are amongst us. Sure, when you watch a situation where you go into Lagos and see skyscrapers are not being financed by any banks and what have you, and you say you don't know where this, everybody knows. It's the most open secret that we know in Nigeria here. Go after these people.
I did also the oil thieves.
Of course, they're part of it. It's one sector. So they continue to loot Nigeria blind. And you keep them, and you leave them, and you say 200 million Nigerians should suffer. Absolutely not. The president must reverse course. The president must go after these people and let Nigerians breathe. That's what this president must do. He cannot say that Nigerians should suffer whilst the subsidy thieves go scot-free. How does that begin to make sense? Now, tell you what, Sheung, if you understand the level of hardship in Nigeria and the cumulative effect, the vicious circle, everything. Rent in Abuja is now going to some places 70 million naira, 80 million naira per annum. In the suburbs there, you cannot get a 2-bedroom now for less than 1.5 million naira. You cannot buy tomatoes, you cannot buy onions, you cannot buy rice. All because a wrong decision was taken. And you said that this is easier for you to do than go after less than 1,000 people. What's EFCC doing? What's ICPC doing? What's SFU doing? What's police doing? We're not a banana republic.
How dangerous is it to break this cabal?
Sheung, we have the law on our side. We have the law
Can
on
we
our
start
side.
by identifying these people?
That is what...
Let the name and shaming begin and let Nigerians know who are these people. Is it possible?
Exactly. But tell you what, Sheung, the law stipulates what must be done to people who abuse our laws. They should be prosecuted. The government knows these people. Don't ignore these people. Go after them. That's what will save his government.
All right, just give me a moment. Let me turn to a lawyer and rights activist, Mr. Samson Itodo, who is the executive director of Yaga Africa. He joins us virtually. Thank you so much, Mr. Itodo, for joining us. I've spoken to you about this protest. Now the president has spoken on the 4th day of the protest. What do you make of the president's speech today?
Well, thank you very much, Sheung, and good evening to Nigerians wherever they are in part of the world. Well, the president has spoken, but Nigerians are disappointed that the president's statement this morning failed the expectations of Nigerians. That there was jubilation when it was announced that the president was going to speak to the Nigerian people for whom he holds power and trust on their behalf. But his speech was a missed opportunity. And it was a missed opportunity for 3 things, because there were 3 things that we all expected the president was going to address. The first one was that the president would directly respond to the demands that the protesters have made. Principal amongst them is the issue around cutting the cost of governance, is the issue around human capital development, is the issue around constitutional reforms, but also improving the cost, of living. And I thought that a presidential address of this nature would have taken, if not all the 10 issues, but take the key issues around the cost of living, issues around cutting down the cost of governance, issues around accountability. But that was not addressed.
Is there any positive for you, Samson, in that speech?
No, I will come to that. And that's what I was going to say, that while the president recognized the fact that, there were fatalities, in this protest, which, to a large extent, you commend him for doing that. But he failed to express his commitment to holding those people to account. Because there were Nigerians whose lives were lost. Yes, it's good to commiserate with the families. But what about holding the people who killed Nigerians, in the course of this protest to account? And I'm very, very sad and disappointed that the protesters who were very peaceful, are being held responsible, for the hijack, the hoodlums that invaded the protest. It's just sad. But also the fact that there were over 600 Nigerians who were arrested as a result of this protest. I thought that the president would have used this opportunity, to ask the security agencies to release the protesters. And these are innocent protesters who were unharmed. I'm not referring to criminals who chose to leverage this opportunity of those protests for criminality purposes. Those individuals to face the wrath of the law. But for the protesters who were very peaceful, who were only asking for a better deal from their leaders, it is unfair to those people that they were attacked. Some of them were shot at, including journalists who we have reported life experiences where they were intimidated, assaulted by security agencies. And if you attack journalists who were performing their responsibility of protecting our democratic process in the course of that assignment, then you have actually hurt and assaulted the Constitution. And so for me, I think that the president needs to really do better. Yes, he's opened, the doors for dialogue, but the parameters for that dialogue need to be clearly laid out. And I think the president and the presidency needs to understand that Nigerians have lost trust and faith in the government. And so therefore, government needs to take actions to inspire and build confidence. And I thought that the president would have used this morning's speech, to respond directly to the issues raised by the protesters.
Did you see any positive whatsoever? For example, the president has opened a line of dialogue to the to the demonstrators. Do you think that's a positive?
I think that, one of the positives from the speech, the president outlined some of the actions his government, have taken, in the last 1 year. And yes, these programs, have been implemented, are being implemented by the presidency. Now, the big question is, to what extent does the public understand and know that these programs do exist? How are those programs inclusive? How are they addressing the needs of the people? Because if you look at all the programs that the president, read out in his speech, to a large extent, for those of us who work in this space, we know that those programs exist. But how come you have this plethora of interventions, yet people are still experiencing harsh economic conditions at the local level and at different levels? Because the quality of life has not improved, the cost of commodities are still rising, and what people are bothered about. And you can see, in one of the protests, one of the images where a woman took an empty pot, to the street. And what does that symbolize? It symbolizes the fact that they do not have access to capital, to buy what? To buy food, because their purchasing power has diminished in the last couple of months as a result of certain policies of government. Yes, it's one thing to say that some of these actions taken have long-term effects, but there are also actions that the government can take. The body language would demonstrate to Nigerians that this particular government at all levels, is committed to addressing this issue. What about at the state level? The president said over 500 billion, have been deployed to the states. How come we still have, this wide income or economic inequality at the state level? Somebody needs to ask those questions, and Nigerians deserve answers. That if you have all these programs and yet the quality of our life has not improved, then there's actually a problem.
But going forward, something, this kind of engagement, in the UK where you are at the moment, the escalation in the street protests in France, in the US, we see the fear has always been not about those who want to peacefully protest, but those who want to take advantage of it. How do we then handle, you are in the civic space, how do you handle in the moment of mobilization, how do you handle a possible escalation? And which is one of the things that the president said, and that the police had also said that there were nobody killed, none of the protesters killed by the police. In fact, the police have said about 9 of the operatives have been critically injured, and the one that was said to have been killed miraculously survived it. Now, these are big questions around anytime government hears protest and the kind of body language towards that kind of movement.
I think that there are few actions that can be taken. The first one is the president needs to acknowledge and respond to the demands that the protesters have made. And his speech does not respond directly to those. If he does that, it would inspire confidence on the part of Nigerians that he's committed to solving this problem. The second is to prevent further escalation. There are certain provocative actions that have been taken by different stakeholders. They've been sponsored anti-protests. There have been thugs who have disrupted the protesters. There've also been provocation, from security agencies who have deployed brutal force to intimidate and disperse the protesters. These kinds of actions need to be stopped. That way, it gives the protesters the confidence that government respects the constitutional right, so that when they go for dialogue, they will have confidence that the government is committed to addressing some of those issues. The third critical part, that deals with the dialogue. Who will be dialoguing with these protesters? What will be the conditions for the dialogue? But also, what will be the time frame for implementing some of the actions that have been outlined, as part of a response to the demands that the protesters have made? These are the kinds of practical steps, if taken, can address and de-escalate the tension. But lastly, is the fact that the blackmail and the intimidation of people who are innocently, legitimately protesting needs to stop. That is not how to solve.
So something, just in about 20 seconds quickly, I'd like you to respond to what Itodo Peter said. Said the businessman came on Twitter, on the X social media platform, and he says, one, I doff my heart to those of you who have been protesting peacefully since the 1st of August. You have shaken Nigeria to the core and dispelled the falsehood that many of our youth are not politically active and all do not care to demand good governance. I beg you in the name of God to please call off the strike now in the aftermath of the EndSARS. What do you make of it? Should the protesters call it off now for the possible occurrence or the kind of things that Itodo Peter has raised?
Well, I think the protesters will need to make that judgment call, because I'm not one of the protesters and I'm not a leader who is protesting. It's not in my place. I think it is in their place to actually, evaluate the situation and see if the president's response or speech responds to the specific needs. I think the question is not about calling off the protest. Is that there is need for dialogue and government needs to show good faith that it's committed to resolving the problems within a definite time frame.
Samson Itodo, lawyer, civil rights activist, and the executive director of Yaga Africa. Thank you so much indeed for your time tonight. Let's conclude our conversation, Mr. Kachikwu. If you are clamoring that the president should reverse the decision on fuel subsidy, where would the money come from? How do you fund it?
Sure. Essentially right now, what we are doing is taking the budget for subsidy and using that budget for social schemes. We saw what happened in the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs. That money was being stolen. We are seeing what's happening in different ministries that are being stolen. So is it better for the money to be stolen by a few individuals in government or for the money to go to the masses?
It's been stolen also by some other cabals that you have mentioned.
That is why.
Although you have refused to mention their names, but you know them.
What I'm saying concerning the cabals is that it's an open secret.
But you know them. Do you know them?
It's an open secret to all Nigerians. You have talked about the cabal extensively for a long time. We all know who these people are. Government should go after these people. I want to also speak to what Itodo Peter said. The reality is that the security agents have a very, very, very tough task. If you watch what happened in Kano, if you had let those protesters, if you didn't curtail those protesters, they will have run over the government house in Kano or the government house in Kaduna. So it's a very, very, very difficult task. We understand that there's legitimate need for the protest, but we also know that this is Nigeria where politics is being fused with legitimate demands.
Are you worried about the flights of Russia that we're seeing that they're carrying around?
What you will see is that politics has come in. You have some people who are using this, and with the Dangote NNPC situation, calling for the removal of the GC of NNPC. That's politics. You have people bringing flag of Russia who are saying essentially, if there's a coup in the region, why not a coup here? That's politics. So we now see why is the presidency afraid that people want to truncate our democracy through the back door? If they lost out in the elections, that they are now coming through the back door, through this protest, to say this government will not stand. But this president, like I always say, made a mistake. As president of Nigeria, his first defining task after such a rancorous election should have been to unite all Nigerians around the common charter.
Does he have the opportunity or the window to do that?
Tell you something, I keep on saying, President Bola Tinubu is a smart president. Trust me on this. He's a very smart president. Smarter than the other old fogies. So I know he has what it takes to do what needs to be done. But he needs to get rid of the Emilio tendency in him. He knows what to do, and he can do it, and he can still do it. I trust and I pray God that he will do right by Nigerians. I still believe that his presidency will succeed if he does the right thing.
You think for the peace of Nigeria, the protest should end?
Absolutely. This protest must end yesterday, not today.
On a final note, the state governments are those who are receiving more of what should have been subsidy. Why is the attention not on the state governors and the government on how they spend this money?
That is what the media ought to be doing, educating the citizenry. We have this unhealthy focus on the center, whereas the people are residents in the localities where the governors and local government chairmen are presiding, and where they've been getting stupendous income in the last 1 year, and a lot of them are doing nothing. We should ask questions of these people. You saw the recent Supreme Court ruling concerning their funding and what have you. People should start asking questions of these people. People should start understand that power starts from the local government level, and ask them what are they doing with their funding at that level.
Dumadi Kachikwu was the presidential candidate of the ADC in the 2023 election. Thank you so much indeed for your time tonight. I appreciate your thoughts.